Look at this little girl. My good buddy Jesse's place. This car hasn't seen the light of day since, let's see, 2013. She's coming over to H's for a little love. Look out, Chunk. Look out. She don't look too bad for a 3-minute wash.
After 10 years.
Well, it's bright and early Saturday morning. Brucey's got a new toy that he's pretty excited about. Prouder than a peacock. But, yeah, I got Jesse's Newport over here. Jesse's getting hitched here in a month or so. And he'd like to drive the car for the wedding. And like we said, it hasn't been out and about for about 10 years. The car does run just fine. But we weren't going to even screw around trying to get it running with that old gas and stuff, because it's here for a Holley sniper kit. We do some injection. We're going to re-gear the rear end and put a stall converter in it, because it's got a factory converter right now and she's got a hog ass cam in her. So we're going to fix all that. So let's get her in the shop. Got her up in the air. I didn't mention that we also need to do the rear main on this car. So he's got a billet seal retainer from Mancini Racing. I also need to pick up a oil pan gasket yet. We got all our parts laid out here. We got a spread bore Holley sniper kit with the ignition control. So that's a CDI box, coil, and Hyperspark distributor. Moving on down the line, got us, what is this unit? A power lock for the 8 3/4, set of 355 gears, and the install kit. Also doing a 3000 stall to accommodate that Mopar purple cam that's in there, and a big old Hog Molly 10K cooler to keep things in check. And fresh fuel tank, because he said that one had some crud in it. And the high pressure filter. And my go-to Walbro 255 inline pump. Oh, up underneath this rig. See, it's been leaking some stuff for a while. It's pretty saturated under here. But, reading some mixed reviews about if that pan can come down without lifting the engine. So we'll give her a shot without picking the motor up. I can tell by right away that these headers are going to have to come off to get that trans out of there to put our converter in. And these transmission lines are in the way to drop the oil pan, and they're right up against the header anyways. So we'll build some new ones for our new cooler. We'll come out of the tranny and go all the way over to the frame rail and follow that up to the core support. But, yeah, I'm going to get started pulling these headers off of here. Frickin' kids. Comes frickin' skidding in here, tightens his chain, leaves his tools laying all over the place, leaves a mess on the floor, then frickin' burns out of here. You can hear him out there ripping right now. What are we going to do with him, Brucey, huh? Must be done. Taking a break?
Yeah.
I got a funny story for you.
Yeah?
When you were a baby, I was working on something in the shop, and I needed some bolts for my exhaust collector. I don't remember what project I was working on, but, you know, collector bolts. And your mother overheard the conversation that I needed some collector bolts. And she's like, why would people collect bolts? As in if they were a collector's item that people kept. So, there's a funny story for you. I don't know about you frickin' Mopar guys, but you don't have to drain the frickin' coolant to put headers on a Chevrolet. Just saying. I got them headers off after a couple hour battle. They are tight. Drop the steering down here, as you can see, off the idler and the pitman arm. And got all the oil pan bolts out. Also had to pull the starter, obviously. We'll see if this sucker will come out of there. It looks like it'll come right out. See the pickup tube in there? Oh yeah, no problem. I could see if there was some baffling in this pan, it would create an issue, but that's nice. I was not looking forward to having to unbolt the motor mounts and jack that thing up. Win. Well, I got the pan rail all cleaned up. Everything getting ready to go back together here. The old seal pulled out. And get all that stuff cleaned up. And like I had said, we're going back together with this Mancini Racing billet seal retainer. And I took the old one out. The slip seal was facing to the back there. And as well as the new Mancini one, it came with the seal shoved in it in the same orientation. And that didn't seem right to me. So I got on the old Google. We're going to use this one, Vite and Felpro seal. But everything I'm reading, the seal goes the opposite direction with the lip sealed towards the front of the engine. So hopefully that's right. We shall see, I guess. Well, there it is. Cross your fingers. Time to throw the pan back on. Trans out. New converter in. I did a pump seal right away and the output shaft seal for good measure. And I just ran a tap in the converter here because there's a bunch of paint these bolts didn't want to start. And I'm going to have to drill that flex plate there because stock there was little 5/16 bolts and they've jumped all the way up to a 7/16. So I'll get them drilled out and shove this baby back in there. I'll also note I ran these bolts down in here all the way and they're bottomed out. Probably going to have to run a washer or two on there or she ain't going to tighten up. Well, that's unfortunate. Different bolt circle on the flex plate. Hey, that's better. Still had to open them holes up for this converter, but parts store had her. $12. I got the driver's side header back up in there. And before putting this passenger one on, I went ahead and welded O2 bung on. This is the one that Holley sends. It's meant to be clamped on or you can weld around the whole perimeter. But I keep these stainless bungs in stock, so I used one of them. I used an old junk O2 sensor and screwed it in there before I weld her in so it doesn't distort the threads from the heat. Almost got myself in a pickle there with that O2 sensor placement. She's clear now, good clearance everywhere, but I had to lop this boss off that was on the side of the transmission. Good to go now. I'm getting ready to put the third member back in. I just want to show you the paint on this rear axle yet. Like a time capsule underneath all that grime. But the gears are all set up and ready to go back in, so we'll get this shoved up in there and get to the part you probably are all here to see. The old sniper install. I got that fuel tank out of there. And by the look of this sender here, you can about guess what it looks like inside. I immediately ran outside with this tank because of the frickin' varnish smell in the shop was killing me. But, yeah, I'm glad we bought a new tank. The filler neck was equally as crusty. So we got a little science project going on here. Some of you probably know what this is all about, but the battery charger hooked up. If you're not familiar with this process, just Google electrolysis rust removal. It works, fellas. A fresh tank in there. New fuel sender. The one for this NEWPORT was unavailable, so the one for a charger looked the same. But it worked out pretty good because the outlet, instead of being 5/16 is 3/8, and it has a return line fitting, so that was helpful. But anywho, got our 255 Walbro fuel pump up there, and 3/8 poly feed line, 5/16 poly return. And I got that routed right where the factory lines were. Do a high pressure fuel filter there. And I'm clipped into all the factory clips for the fuel line. So I popped the carb off and just slapped the sniper on there. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because this is a spread bore sniper, there is no fuel pressure regulator built in. So we got an adjustable fuel pressure regulator right there. It doesn't matter what side you feed and return from on these, it just flows through. And you put the regulator on the return side. So I've got my feed coming up here. I transitioned to a braided line just right by the pinch weld back there. So return here goes into the regulator, and poly line coming out of that baby. So time to start wiring this baby up. This is, I think, where everybody gets intimidated, but this is super easy. So I've just got the handheld plugged in here. That's one leg of this here. And the O2 sensor is plugged into there. And I've coiled that up because there's great plenty of wiring that comes with that. The coolant temp sensor I've got up here. I had to unhook his mechanical gauge because there's really not another spot to get tapped in there. There's another spot on the front here, but it's only 1/8 inch pipe, so really can't use that. But I put all the plugs back in and hooked the plug wires back up, and they're just kind of haphazardly ran because I'm going to fire this thing on this ignition system before we switch it over to the Hyperspark. I'm going to do that because this thing hasn't run in 10 years, and I don't know where base timing is for this cam. And if I fire it up on this, put the timing light on, see where it's at, that'll give me a nice baseline to start with when we do get the Hyperspark installed. So aside from what we've got plugged in already, which isn't much, we've got this 10-pin connector. The only thing we're even going to use out of that is the wire going to the tachometer. And this, whatever, 7-pin connector, that's the main connector for the main power harness. We won't use this until we hook the Hyperspark up. That's the crank sensor signal. Like I said, we won't be using that. The only thing we need right here is this yellow wire needs to go to the negative terminal on the coil. That's where it gets RPM signal from for the Holley. This blue wire goes all the way back to our fuel pump back there, and that gets grounded locally. And battery, negative and positive, that needs to go directly to the battery. And this little pink wire would be switched ignition. So, I mean, super simple. There's hardly anything here. 1, 2, 3, 5 wires. And theoretically, we should be running. Alright, I've just made the connections on the battery. I wired the fuel pump back. Of course, that wire was 1 foot short, so it extended a little bit. Mounted my relay there, along with the inline fuse, just so these wires would reach. And I've just got them alligator clips temporarily on the coil into that yellow wire. And I've got it tied up so it can't arc out or anything. But power this baby up, and immediately you want to go into the wizards. So I just looked on my box for my sniper, and if you try to use this thing with your finger, it doesn't hardly work. So use the stylus. This is the Quadrajet sniper, part number 550-867. So we'll select that one. 8 cylinders. Engine displacement, we got a 383 cubic inch cop power plant. Target idle speed, we'll set her at 750. We'll go 800. We'll give her a little bit of chance to breathe there. Cam type, well, you only get one option, stock or mild. Let's see, ignition type, we're running coil negative for now. And there's our base file set. Now it's building our global file. Cycle to ignition. Okay. Well, here's our ignition for right now. And now we need to set base fuel pressure. After 3 or 4 key cycles, I got my fuel pressure set at 60 pounds. I had a little leak right there. Tighten that up and we're good to go. About ready to test fire this baby. Oh, now from our handheld here, I'm going to go to monitors. Monitors again. And initial startup. This should show us our TPS, all that stuff. TPS is reading. Map sensor's reading properly. That's 99 kPa. That's a pretty good sanity check there. Our engine coolant temp. But yeah, we'll be able to watch our RPM signal when we crank it here. And I know that this thing's going to have to make a few revolutions before it decides it's got a good crank signal. So let's give her a try. So we got crank signal. Got no fire in the pipes yet though. Let's hit her once more. I think I'm going to jump inside the car here and crank on it just to make sure we got oil pressure, since this thing hasn't ran in so long and we just did oil pan. And yes, I did put oil in it. Holy shit! There it is. Got some oil pressure. Make sure we don't have any massive leaks. I call that a success. Woo! I topped the coolant off and hooked up the timing light. We're going to fire back up and give her the old timing check, see where she's at. Woo! So we got that tranny fluid burned off the headers. Holy man. She's been running for, I don't know, 7-8 minutes. 150 degrees on the coolant temp, maintaining target idle. Air fuel's just a touch rich. I don't know what they got it set up in here. It probably is 13.5 what they got AFR target at. But it's doing everything it should be doing. The IX, they say at 10% or under is where you want to be there. So it doesn't even look like you need to dick with the throttle blade. That's pretty neat. I just checked timing. It's at about 11, 12 degrees at idle. Yeah, we're gonna let her get up to temp. see what happens. Moving right along to our Hyperspark install. I pulled the number 1 plug out, and my buddy Dallas was here. He put his thumb over the spark plug hole, and I cranked the motor over with a wrench until we started feeling compression, and then lined up the old timing mark down there on 0, top dead center, pulled the old distributor, and I got the coil out of the way, and dropped the Hyperspark distributor in. And pretty much all you got to do after that is they give you this clear cap, looks like a sandwich wrapper, but drop that baby on there and rotate the distributor till everything lines up, and that's all there is to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the old ignition wiring, the old ignition module, ballast resistor. I'll get all that stuff out of here and try to tidy this up a bit. I think this is a good spot to take a little break and give you guys an update. So I got the ignition box off the firewall. Got rid of a whole bunch of mess of wires that was here. Actually, they're all right there. But I've got the CDI box mounted. My flashlight's dying, but it's up there. There's only 6 wires that come out of that. 2 that go directly to the battery. You know how Holley is. Got to have it right on the battery. But these 2 wires are for the coil that's mounted here. I had these rubber isolators laying around, so I used those. Since this inner fender isn't completely flat, helped get her sitting decent. But those 2 wires there, and then there's additional 2 wires that are running up the fender here underneath my fender cover that go to this plug. And the red one needs to go to switched power, which I've got all my switch powers here. We went from 1 switch power wire to 3 now. 1 for the distributor itself, 1 for the CDI box, and another one for the sniper. So I got all 3 of those switch powers here. When I cut all that stuff off for the ignition wiring, I found the keyed hot here, 12 volts. And I'm going to tie all those together there. And this white wire needs to go into the output harness. Now, there's a whole pile of wires here. This will control electric fans, all that stuff. We don't need any of that stuff. All we need is this white wire to connect to that one that's hanging there. And the brown wire that's going to go to the tachometer in the car. So, out of all them wires, that's all I need. I'm going to de-pin all these out of this plug just to clean everything up. So, I'll get that done and tie those hot wires in, and we should be able to run at that point, or at least go through the wizard again and set the sniper up to accept the Hyperspark distributor. Well, we got that all tidied up fairly well. Got all them wires loomed up, and I did end up having some cavity plugs for that connector, so we won't get any weather inside those pins I pulled out. You can see we're down to 2 wires there going in there. That red one's just snaking around the backside. But we're ready to run through the wizard. I've got her keyed up already. And let's go through this together. Tuning, system, ignition setup. You can see we're on coil negative with ignition type. So we're going to switch this to Hyperspark distributor and save. Now it asks us to cycle the key. Okay, we'll do that. And now we can jump back into the tuning menu. Basic, Spark, and here's where we can adjust our kind of initial timing settings. 15 degrees at idle, 36 at cruise, and 32 wide open throttle. 15 degrees cranking. We'll try it there. Might have to lower the timing a little bit for startup, and I'm sure she'll take probably a couple more degrees at wide open, but some pretty safe settings to start with. So I'm gonna build me a set of plug wires and see how she runs. Had a long night, huh, Brucey? He's tired. It's the following day here. We burned the midnight oil on this old girl last night. It's Thursday afternoon, and we're going to get our final tux fitment for the wedding here in about 2 hours. But got the plug wires done, and she fired right up on the Hyperspark system. And I ended up having to give it a little bit more idle timing, and I'll show you how I established that. So we'll go to the home screen here, tuning. Whoops, I had double tapped there. System and static timing. This allows you to lock the timing down to one spot while it's idling. That initial 15 that I had in there, the motor was really stumbling and shaking, so I gave her a couple of degrees of timing. You just hit the set button and it'll hold it right there at 18 degrees. And you know, you can swing this all over the place wherever you want while it's sitting there idling, and you can find your best idle. But I established that 18 was pretty close and kind of made the motor run the smoothest. So after you get that figured out, you can go back into the tuning portion here. Basic, spark, ignition timing at idle, and then you can save that. That'll be your base timing. In addition to that static timing deal, you can lock the timing down and hook the timing light up and verify that what it says here for timing is correct on the balancer with your timing light, so you're not way off in left field. Well, that was Jesse leaving with the car. Running short on time, so I didn't get to take you guys for a ride, but I told him just make real smooth throttle transitions, you know, in and out of throttle. Don't just whack the throttle, and let that Holley figure out its fueling before he gets crazy with it. I did have to pop the card out, and I shoved it in my computer and adjusted the idle air control park parameters. It wanted a little bit of throttle on hot start, so hopefully that took care of that. I didn't get a chance to test it. We got a wedding to get ready for, so I better get cleaned up a little bit. Look like Grizzly Adams. Well, here we are, wedding day. All the groomsmen are in the house getting ready. I'm ready already. Jesse and his brother got her all shined up yesterday. She's looking nice. Oh, fuck yeah. What do you think, Jesse?
Fucking awesome.
We got the car done, bud.
Fuck yeah.